Good morning. So, I'm going to give you a list of names, and at a certain age, you're not going to have any idea who these people are, but Zach King, Amanda Cerny, James Charles, Addison Ray. Most of us have no idea who those people are. These people are considered influencers in this day and age, right? So, you hear about that term all the time these days, social media influencers, and they make a fortune just for having an opinion. And unfortunately, a lot of people look to them for those opinions. So when I looked up the definition of influencer, it is a person who inspires or guides the actions of others. So I want to look at some examples of influencers in the Bible, both good and bad, and then we'll just talk about influence in general and go from there. So first, let's go to Judges 16. So it's a story that everybody is very familiar with. I'll start reading in verse 4. After this, it came about that he loved a woman. This is Samson. He loved a woman in the valley of Sorek whose name was Delilah. The lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, "Entice him and see where his great strength lies, and how we may overpower him, and we may bind him to afflict him. Then we'll each give you 1,100 pieces of silver." So Delilah said to Samson, "Please tell me where your great strength is, and how you may be bound to afflict you." So here we have the Philistines being influencers toward Delilah, and of course the other influence is money. You keep reading and it goes on. We all know the story how it goes, but then you have Delilah, who is an influencer to Samson, and there's all different ways to influence somebody. But then there's an example of a bad influence. If we go over to 2 Samuel chapter 13. And this is one of those stories that, it's just some of those Old Testament stories are hard to read sometimes, and this is about Amnon and Tamar. It was after this that Absalom, the son of David, had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar, and Amnon, the son of David, loved her. Amnon was so frustrated because of his sister Tamar that he had made himself ill, for she was a virgin, and it seemed hard to Amnon to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shimeah, David's brother, and Jonadab was a very shrewd man. He said to him, "O son of the king, why are you so depressed morning after morning? Will you not tell me?" Then Amnon said to him, "I'm in love with Tamar, the sister of my brother Absalom." Jonadab then said, "Lie down in your bed and pretend to be ill. When your father comes to see you, say to him, 'Please let my sister Tamar come and give me some food to eat. Let her prepare the food in my sight that I may see it and eat it from her hand.'" So here we have Jonadab swaying influence in about the worst way possible, and if you continue reading, you see how that story ends. And just another example of a bad influence, and it's worth being said, a lot of times these people didn't need much of a push probably, but they definitely got it. So let's turn over one more story here to Mark. Let's see here. So Mark chapter 6. We'll start reading in verse 17. For Herod himself had sent and had John arrested and bound in prison on account of Herodias, the wife of his brother Philip, because he had married her. For John had been saying to Herod, "It's not lawful for you to have your brother's wife." Herodias had a grudge against him and wanted to put him to death and could not do so. For Herod was afraid of John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and he kept him safe. And when he heard him, he was very perplexed, but he enjoyed listening to him. A strategic day came when Herod on his birthday gave a banquet for his lords and military commanders and the leading men of Galilee. And when the daughter of Herodias herself came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his dinner guest. And the king said to the girl, "Ask me for whatever you want, and I'll give it to you." And he swore to her, "Whatever you ask of me, I will give it to you, up to half of my kingdom." And she went out and said to her mother, "What shall I ask for?" And she said, "The head of John the Baptist." Immediately she came in a hurry to the king and asked, saying, "I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter." And although the king was very sorry, yet because of his oaths and because of his dinner guest, he was unwilling to refuse her. Immediately the king sent an executioner and commanded him to bring back his head. He went and had him beheaded in the prison and brought his head on a platter and gave it to the girl, and the girl gave it to her mother. So, once again, a couple of examples of bad influence. He was enticed by the dance, and then of course the mom had the plot the entire time to get John the Baptist killed, and she had that kind of influence over her daughter to do that. So, bad influences, I really had to stop at 3 because I had a whole list, and we just don't have a whole lot of time. So, but they're all throughout the text, and there's a reason for that. We have to be aware of the people we surround ourselves with, the situations we get ourselves in, because it can sneak up on you pretty fast. Now let's flip it and look at some good influences. So let's go to Acts 16. Let's see, 16, and we'll start reading in verse 25. This is when Paul and Silas were imprisoned. About midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns of praise to God, and the prisoners were listening to them. Suddenly there came a great earthquake, so the foundations of the prison house were shaken, and immediately all the doors were opened and everyone's chains were unfastened. When the jailer awoke and saw the prison doors open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself, supposing the prisoners had escaped. But Paul cried out with a loud voice, saying, "Do not harm yourself, for we are all here." And he called for lights and rushed in, and trembling with fear he fell down before Paul and Silas. After he brought them out, he said, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" They said, "Believe in the Lord Jesus, and you will be saved, you and your household." And they spoke the word of the Lord and him together with all who were in his house. And he took them that very hour of the night and washed their wounds. Immediately he was baptized, he and all of his household. So here we have a great influence, Paul and Silas, on a guy that did not have the Lord before this. And that there's a whole different story we could talk about this. I mean, I've always, there's some people you read in the Bible and you're like, wait a minute, what must they have been thinking? Like this guy, I mean, all the prisoners could have left. What prisoner doesn't leave when they have the chance to leave? And they're all there. So, there had to have been just a moment of, that's why he's like, what do I have to do? So it's a great influence. And then of course, there's so many examples of Jesus' influence. I had to just pick a couple. But you talk about a good influence. Who's better than Jesus? So let's look at John chapter 8. Everyone knows this story pretty well. Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people were coming to him, and he sat down and began to teach them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery, and having set her in the center of the court, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in adultery in the very act. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. What do you say?" They were saying this, testing him so that they might have grounds for accusing him. But Jesus stooped down with his finger and wrote on the ground. When they persisted in asking him, he straightened up and said to them, "He who is without sin among you, let him be the first to throw a stone at her." Again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And when they heard it, they began to go out one by one, beginning with the older ones, and he was left alone, and the woman where she was, in the center of the court. Straightening up, Jesus said to her, "Woman, where are they? Did no one condemn you?" She said, No one, Lord." And Jesus said, "I don't condemn you either. Go from now on and sin no more." So here's Jesus' influence over some people who had it in their heart that they needed to murder this woman for being caught in the act of adultery, and just some words, just some basic words. He was out the first sin, cast the stone. It's a powerful influence that he had over those people, and they all left because they were cut to the heart. Let's look at one more, John chapter 13. John chapter 13. This is after the institution of the Lord's Supper. Let's start verse 13. Yeah, so going back a little further, let's start a little further. He poured water in the basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel with which he was girded. He came to Simon Peter and he said to him, "Lord, you wash my feet?" And Jesus answered him and said, What I do you do not realize now, but you will understand hereafter." Peter said to him, "Never shall you wash my feet." Jesus answered him, "If I don't wash you, you have no part with me." So Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, then wash not only my feet, but also my hands and my head." Jesus said to him, "He who is bathed needs only to wash his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not all of you." For he knew that the one who was betraying him. For this reason, he said, "Not all of you are clean." So when he had washed their feet and taken his garments and reclined at the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I've done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. If I then, the Lord and teacher, washed your feet, you ought to wash one another's feet. For I gave you an example that you also should do as I did to you." So, huge influence here. You have the most important man ever to walk the earth humbling himself to wash the feet of the people who are following him as an example, to show them what they should be doing for one another. It's just a powerful influence and what an example. Let's look at just some verses, and it's going to be kind of rapid fire, so follow along. 1 Peter chapter 2. These are just some verses that popped out at me when I was thinking about influence. So 1 Peter 2, start reading in verse 9. "Obtaining as the outcome of your faith the salvation of your souls." Excuse me, that's the wrong chapter. "You're a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for God's own possession, so that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who has called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. For you once were not a people, but now you are the people of God. You had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Beloved, I urge you as aliens and strangers to abstain from fleshly lusts which wage war against the soul. Keep your behavior excellent among the Gentiles, so that in the thing which they slander you as evildoers, they may, because of your good deeds as they observe them, glorify God in the day of visitation." So this is just another way we're being told to be a good influence to the people that are around us, to live the life where we are an influence. 1 Peter 3:15. "Sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks to give you an account for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and reverence." Again, being ready to be a good influence to those that are around us. Romans 12:2. "Do not be conformed to this world, be transformed by the renewing of your minds, that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect." It wasn't really hard to find verses about influence, I got to tell you. Matthew 5. Let's see, Matthew 5, start reading in verse 13. "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor does anyone light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven." Be a good influence. Let everyone see that you're a good influence to guide people to where they should be. And it seems I can't ever talk without talking about 1 Corinthians 15:33. "Evil companions corrupt good morals," or some variation thereof. It's a big one. It's a big verse, and there's a lot of truth to it. You know, there's how many of us have been in a situation where we're in a situation and we look up and we're like, how did we get here? What decision did I make that has put me where I am right now? And you start backtracking and you realize you've let yourself be swayed by someone who really should not have had any kind of sway over you. And you've ended up where you are now, and now you got to get out of there. And it's more difficult once you're in a bad situation to get out of it. It's just a whole lot easier to avoid it the first time. So being aware of who you surround yourself with and trying to make the best choices that you can. You know, if you start seeing those red flags early on, there's probably a reason you're seeing those red flags. You know, listen to them and pick a different friend. And let's go over to Proverbs. There's a ton of verses in Proverbs that I just kept finding them in Proverbs. So let's start with chapter 9 and verse 9. "Give instruction to a wise man, he will still be wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase his learning." 10:17. "He is on the path of life who heeds instructions, but he who ignores reproof grows astray." 12:26, the righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. This is all, again, about influence, about how we can use our influence, about how we should prepare ourselves. 13:20 in Proverbs, he who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. 15:1, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. All these things are important if we're really going to influence somebody. We need to show ourselves to be wise, show ourselves to be patient. Proverbs 22:24, start reading in verse 24. Do not associate with a man given to anger, or go with a hot-tempered man, or you will learn his ways and find a snare for yourself. That's pretty true. So surround yourself with some mad people, you end up being mad. It's you see it all the time. I think verse 25 is so important. You will learn his ways and find a snare for yourself. That you will be influenced. That's what it's saying. You will be influenced if you hang around with an angry man. You know, the thing to remember is that we are all influenced. All of us. No matter how long you've been a Christian, no matter how strong a Christian you are influenced by other people. That is just how it works on earth. So you have to make sure that you're being influenced the correct way. And by the other token, you're also all influencers. So you are influencing someone all the time, whether you realize it or not. They're watching what you're saying. They're watching what you do, how you approach situations, the way that you talk about people when they're not around. You know, someone's always watching. You are constantly influencing somebody. The last verse I have written down is Proverbs 27:17. Iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. So, be a good influence. Surround yourself with people that are good influences. In the beginning of the lesson, I read you a list of names that you guys don't know. I'm about to read you a list of other names that you don't know. Merle Gray, Erwin Barger, David Brown, Georgia Novella Puckett, Clifton and Gloria Hurst, Susan Shiflett, and Janice Ball. These are my influences from my formative years of Christianity. Who's on your list? We've all got a list. And more importantly, whose list are you on? That's the thing you got to remember, is that you're on someone's list, and you want to be on there for the right reason. We got to do all we can to make sure that we're guiding and inspiring our fellow man to live a Christian life. Is anyone else? I wanted to kind of open it up. Has anyone else could think of some good or bad examples in the Bible, or some other verses that might be apropos?
Genesis 3.
Okay. Take the easy one. The low-hanging fruit. Is that what we're saying? Yeah. Yeah. Very good. The original bad influence. What else? Wow. Yeah. Okay. Sure. How about you, Mary? Jezebel. Yeah. I had Ahab on here too, and I left him off because I ran out of I had to rewrite this thing 2 or 3 times, and I shortened it too much. That's what happens. But yeah, there's a lot of them. I had King Rehoboam, his friends,
Well, follow with your Philippian jailer reference. We've got a reference in Acts a little bit later on of a great man that was very eloquent in the pulpit, Apollos. Yeah, he needed some doctrinal correction, if you will. And Aquila and Priscilla took him aside privately and built on what they had. Here's a good guy. He's not a bad guy, but he needs a little more knowledge. So sometimes we look at our influences, and it has to be something that makes a dramatic change.
Right.
It may just be a tweak. It may be something what outsiders would look at as being very insignificant. But in the case of Apollos, it was a salvation
Yeah.
So we don't always, we don't always have to make some big, huge dramatic change. It can be very subtle.
That's a good point. And you think also about the Saul of Tarsus. He needed to push in the right direction, and look at his influence the rest of his life and what he did. So anybody, I think it's important to remember that it doesn't matter how far down you go the wrong way. There's always a way back. There's always a way back. You just have to want to take it, and it is difficult sometimes to get back. But there are people that want to give you a push. I thought about it, Ananias and Sapphira, but I don't know really who influenced who there. They just were bad for each other, turned out. Well, guys, I appreciate your comments, and we'll take a short break, and then we'll have class.